What do you get out of that? Like, honestly, if you're spewing hate, you've created these laws that are anti everybody except your white self. Let's be real.
Yeah, exactly.
Transamorous Network.
Welcome to the Transamorous Network. I'm Perry.
I'm Remy.
And welcome to another show. This is episode 3 of season 2. Yeah. So I just got to start out to say, I'm really happy that we're doing the show again. This is just so exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm happy to be back too.
Some of our audience is asking if we are going to be starting up the Facebook show again.
Is that right?
Yeah. We're not making any decisions today, but I would like to hear Remy's opinion. I know, Remy, you really liked to do that show.
I did enjoy doing it. I mean, it was like we talked about, it's time consuming. It's every week.
Monotonous, yeah, every week. Relentless.
You know, and that requires traveling across town and all these other things for us and stuff. But it was quite enjoyable. And it was, you know, I watch a movie or see something on the news and I'm like, God, that would have been a great topic for the show.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe we can find a way of, maybe it's not a weekly show. Maybe it's a bi-weekly show.
Or maybe even a monthly show. Or maybe at some point, someone will see what we're doing and want us to go to the next level and provide us some funding that will take Remy and me out of our day jobs and into this full time.
That would be awesome. And we're writing that into our story. So let's make that happen.
You're just pointing to all the cameras.
Let's all make that happen. Dame dinero.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Okay, so that's the deal on the show. Or the Facebook show. So the title of the show today is Your Life Gets Better and Better If You Let It. And we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. Just got to check the time because we're on a 30-minute timer, then we're going to take a break. But first we're going to start with some news. And my news machine is down there, but I'm going to grab it real quick.
Well, we've got a lot of things happening in the news right now. We've got, especially related to the trans community, we have our presidential person, kerfuffle, doing all sorts of things and repealing a lot of rights and acts and stuff like that. A lot of the things that were the non-discrimination acts that we had in place thanks to President Obama, former President Obama. He's now trying to repeal a lot of those things, like as far as housing goes, the HUD situation, and that HUD, people who are receiving HUD funding, homeless shelters and the like, can discriminate against transgender and LGBT elemental Ps based on religious, and that's their big thing, is like being able to use the religious differences excuse.
Yes.
And they're also doing this with healthcare as well. And, you know, these homeless shelters for a lot of, especially trans individuals and trans youth, and trans youth of color in very particular.
The youths.
These are life-saving situations, you know, and what's sad is the discrimination and the violence and the sexual assault that happens in these homeless shelters when trans people are put in the wrong group. So if it's a men's group and you're putting a trans woman into this group, she's now at such risk for violence and sexual violence and discrimination that a lot of them find it safer to just sleep on the street and not even seek help from these shelters. And a lot of trans youth, especially trans youth of color, are being kicked out of their homes by their families.
Yeah.
So these are life-saving situations, potentially, being able to find a warm place to sleep at night.
Yeah.
You know?
It's interesting because I read the policy brief that Ben Carlson's organization, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I know, he's a brother too, it's just shameful, that they published. And Remy and I were talking about this before the show started. We're in an era here in the United States where states' rights are coming to the forefront again. Back in the day, a lot of the conservative movement is a lot about getting the federal government out of people's business. And the way they want to do that is they want to move all the decisions, especially around social decisions, to the states. And so allowing states to do whatever they want because they are not sovereign, but they have their own rights as organized states.
Absolutely.
And so what we're seeing across the board, and Remy was talking about this in the previous episode about abortion, about religious tolerance, and now about, LGBT issues have always been this way, is that the states want to make the decisions on behalf of their own people, rather than having the federal government make the decisions for the people in those states, especially the states that don't want the federal government to. And it's interesting because the states that don't want the federal government to make those decisions are the states that want to decide against the LGBT people or the black people or whatever. And the states that want the federal government to get involved are the states that are in favor of LGBT people or other minorities. It's interesting.
Right, but at the same time, you have states that are saying, now that you're changing the federal law in a way that we don't like, and we now have the sovereignty of our own state to make our own laws, they're saying, fuck you, we're going to support our LGBT LMNOP people.
Do you want to talk about the next article?
Yeah, so the next, let's get there. You know, Colorado, for example, is stepping up and saying, no, we support our trans individuals. They have a gay governor.
Yep.
And there's also a transgender...
First transgender
legislator in the state of Colorado are standing up and saying, these are direct attacks on the LMNOP community, and we're not going to stand for it. We're going to support and take care of our own.
So this is an interesting conundrum that America faces right now that you may not be hearing in this particular way. You have an option on what story you're going to invest in. There's the conservative story that says you don't belong. I'm assuming that you're watching the show because you're at least an ally of the LMNOP. I like that better than LGBT.
I do. And it stands for something, and I can
never... Does it really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know.
We'll have to look at it up later. And so either you align with the conservative story that says you don't deserve any rights, or you can align with the other story in the same issue that says you deserve all the rights that other people get. And depending on which side of the argument, which story you want to invest in, I don't like sides of the argument, which story you're going to invest in, you have some options. And the options on the positive story are pretty freaking good. I mean, Colorado's a nice place to live. Oregon's a great place to live.
Oregon's a great place to live.
California is a great place to live. It's expensive.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't live there. Now, it's unfortunately, and this might not bear out factually, like statistic-wise, it seems to me that these conservative states that are wanting to do things like roll back abortion and roll back tolerances for the LMNOP group, those states happen to be the states where there are a lot of transgender people and poor transgender people, like Alabama and Louisiana and Kansas, Missouri. Is it Missouri?
I don't know.
Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah, Missouri.
Backwards ass states.
Yes, these kind of places. And so the red states. And so I was talking somewhere, I think it might have been a Facebook group. I was talking with a transgender person who lived in one of these red states. And they were like, well, I can't just up and move to one of these states that you're talking about. It's like, I think they were specifically referring to where we live. I can't just move to where you live. And I'm like, why not?
Right.
I mean, what's the worst thing that will happen to you? You will be unemployed and living on the street. Well, if you get kicked out of your house in Alabama, you're living on the street anyway.
And you're not even going to be allowed in a homeless shelter.
That's exactly.
At least here, our homeless shelters will take you in, girl. Stop playing.
That's right.
For real. I mean, it's for real.
No, it's for real. And so what we're seeing, it's very interesting. Not only are we seeing this polarizing of America across ideological lines, but we're seeing polarization occurring across state lines. And so it seems like we're going to end up in a place where we have some states that are favorable to the LMNOPs and some that are actually hostile to them. And it's interesting that there is a factual correlation between the LGBTQIA community and creativity, arts, and vibrancy of communities. And so if you're a state and you're against those populations, you're condemning your communities
to being boring.
Oh my
as
God.
fuck.
And look, most of the major corporations these days are looking to aggressively hire those people because of their creativity and their artistic outlook and their originality and things like that.
Yeah.
And so
broader perspective on life.
On life, yeah.
You've lived different ways.
Yes.
You've
So you have,
lived as a man, you've lived as a woman,
Yes.
you've lived as in between.
So you have more solutions in your head and ways of
Absolutely.
getting to solutions. And so it's like these states that are catering towards hate are shooting themselves in the foot, even with regard to like employment. And a lot of these states, it's so interesting. A lot of these states are suffering not just employment crises, but opioid crises.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's funny, the conservatives talks about these religious Armageddons, you know, pestilence and famine and things like that. And in a way, they're inviting all of that shit by hating. It's just so interesting when you think about from this perspective of stories. So these states have these stories that are filled with hate. And what are their states becoming filled with? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Unemployment, opioid, alcoholism, suicide, all these things. It's just so interesting how your stories create your reality. And it doesn't matter if you're an individual or you're a state.
Yeah. That's a collective story.
Yes.
That's a collective story of a lot of people building a momentum in negativity and hate. And what do you get out of that? Like, honestly, if you're spewing hate, you've created these laws that are anti everybody except your white self. Let's be real.
Yeah, exactly. And
what are you getting?
Yes.
You're not getting any diversity. You're not getting any new thought. You're not getting any love. You're not getting any joy. Like, it makes no sense to me.
I'm thinking through it. In some sense, you're getting security.
Are you really?
Well, you're not, but go with me here. You're
Okay,
getting security in the sense that I feel more secure when things look like how I was raised.
It's a real false sense of security.
It really is.
It's living life with blinders on.
Yes, it's living like you were still in high school when you're 50 years old talking about being the high school football quarterback. It's like that.
Aw, Al Bundy. Good times.
Yeah, it's like that. But you're also getting security in knowing that you're not going to walk around the corner and run into someone who's going to threaten your worldview. You're not going to run around the corner and run into some woman who you think is a man in a dress. And have to deal with your bullshit.
Your wife is popping pills and has an opioid addiction.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
It makes no sense.
It's so crazy.
My mind has trouble. Like, my mind, the way I think, my Myers-Briggs and stuff, I'm a very 1 in 100 million people kind of mind. It makes no sense.
It doesn't make any
sense.
sense.
And that's why I have had a lot of struggle in my life understanding the world around me, because my mind doesn't work that way. So trying to wrap my mind around it is hard sometimes. I'm like, I can't even see it.
Yeah.
And I'm good at looking at things from another person's perspective, but there are certain things I just can't get my mind over there. I just can't.
Yeah, it's weird. And the other thing is, I think from a religious perspective, these people feel that they're being threatened by Satan if they're perceiving something that is against what God is telling them. Like this Satan thing. I mean, I had this friend that I had to...
But see, it's not God telling them. It's their pastor who's interpreting a word in... How can you interpret the word of love into hate?
I know, girl. I know.
Again, it makes no sense to my brain. I don't get it. It
makes no sense to me. It's selective sifting of the Bible. I mean, there's so much love in the Bible, but there is a lot of other bullshit. And if you focus on the other bullshit, then it's hard to see the love that's in the Bible.
But again, it was all written by people.
That's exactly a long time ago.
A long time ago.
In a different world.
In a different world, a different part of the world.
Yes.
And a different culture, a different society structure. We know I'm a witch, pagan, so I can't get down with it. I don't understand.
So I think we're going to end up with two Americas eventually, unless something dramatic happens in politics in 2020, where we have the poorest parts of this country, and they are the poorest parts of the country, that are backwards and conservative. Let me not use backwards because that sounds judgmental. That are regressive. They're regressive. They want to be like the past as opposed to embracing the future.
That makes no sense to me. We move forward. We don't.
There's no way to move backwards.
Backwards.
Yeah, we don't move backwards.
You can't change what has been. You can only look at what is coming.
That's right.
And you can really only look at right here and right now.
That's right.
Because, no one's promised tomorrow.
That's exactly right.
Yesterday's a mystery. No, tomorrow's a mystery. Yesterday's history, and today's a gift because it's the present.
That's exactly
right.
Right.
Isn't that how it goes?
Right.
And it is. It's the moment is now.
Yeah.
And what you do from this point forward.
Yeah.
Period. How do you choose? Again, what perspective do you take, and which way do you choose to take that perspective?
It is a question that I don't think the people in the rural communities are asking, even while their towns are being decimated. I mean,
it's a lot of it comes from fear and ignorance. Really,
yes.
It's a lack of understanding, a lack of their brains can't understand what a trans person is. Like, they just don't get it.
Right.
So therefore, it's wrong. It's evil. It's against this. It's against that. Education. Educate yourself. Learn something. Say hi to somebody. Have a conversation. Like,
that's the easiest way to learn, is just have a conversation.
Have a conversation. Yeah. So many times I've been asked all these kinds of random questions from people, and it's like, I'm like, I'm not really easily offended, and I'm like, okay, go ahead and ask, because you won't know until you know.
That's right.
Period. We don't know until we know.
That's
right.
know. That's right.
I didn't know a pineapple was from the artichoke thistle family until
I didn't either.
Right. Who knows that? No one knows that. Pineapples are part of the thistle family. They're cousins to artichokes.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
You don't know until you know.
Wow. So yeah. And so it's interesting, because the conservative part of America likes to rely on facts, and that's what trips them up in many cases, because facts are hard and cold and hard facts, right? But life is not cold and hard, and people aren't cold and hard. They're changing all the time. And so, like,
and what was a fact yesterday isn't necessarily a fact today.
And that's why you need to talk to someone who you aren't familiar with, rather than try to find facts, because facts will not be as enriching as a conversation with a real human being to give you a sense of what it is you're learning. And so it's just, one of the things that conservative politicians have talked about in order to win seats is preserving jobs in the rural America. And I was just listening to a podcast over the last weekend, where a lot of those jobs they promised didn't materialize because, like you're saying, Remy, the economy is moving forward, and the kind of jobs they were talking about preserving can't be preserved as we move forward, because they're just not, they're obsolete. They're obsolete jobs. So they said, and there's a China crisis going on right now, and Trump is fighting China with trade embargoes because Chinese steel, this is related, Chinese steel is cheaper than steel produced in the United States. And because Trump has put an embargo on Chinese steel, American manufacturers in rural America are going out of business because they can't afford, number one, they can't afford the steel with the embargo attached to it, or with the tariff attached to it. And number two, they can't employ people because people don't want to do those crappy jobs anymore. They want to be designers and software writers. And so the rural America and the jobs that people think should be preserved just can't be preserved. And in the same...
And these people who are trying to preserve these jobs, you're not going to finna go out into the farm.
No. You're not going to roll no metal. You're not going to weld no machinery.
No.
You're not going to do any of that hard-ass work.
You're already above all that, so it doesn't really apply to you.
That's exactly right. So it's like we're in this weird position of progress where rural America is being destroyed, not by foreign competitors, but by rigid ideology that's trying to preserve the past. And part of preserving the past are these traditional values that don't see LGBT people as real people. And it's funny because...
But how about we just keep going further back, when they actually were viable people and members of society? They ran temples and ran our religious and spiritual communities.
It's like, if you want to get really traditional values...
Right, let's go back. Let's take it way back. Let's go before Christian church. Let's take it back.
It's like,
and let's really bring it back.
It's so funny because...
they're picking and choosing which part of history they want to hold on to. And it's the one where they were the ones with all the power.
Yes, Remy. Where they decided to cut off all that past before them that honors what we have today, and say that what they had the stuff that they cut away from and kept is what history was all about. But no,
it's like they look at history as history was only this time frame.
Yes.
And everything before that is just prehistory.
Yes, or what do they call barbarian civilizations.
Which is where you fucking people came from.
So
Neanderthals and shit.
I know, it's just incredible what we're seeing today. And so the rollbacks in the United States, it's interesting. You can adopt the story that the United States is going to hell in a handbasket. And a lot of people are saying that we're on the verge of collapse and this is the last great era of the United States. But at the same time, as evidenced by these two articles, one showing conservatives rolling back protections for LGBT people, but then states like Colorado and California and Oregon doing the exact opposite. There's evidence of every story out there.
Well, you were just talking about too, like before the show, like abortion too. Like this one state is completely anti-abortion, but this neighboring state is now like, we're going to be the abortion capital of America.
That's right.
So what have you really done?
That's exactly right.
Nothing.
You have. You shot yourself in the foot because now instead of getting the revenue that you would get from someone paying for an abortion in your state, they're taking their money and going to the other state and paying for it.
Well, and then you have, was it New Zealand or there's someplace, abortion is now a free.
What?
It's one, and I want to say it's New Zealand, and maybe I'm wrong.
Keep talking. I'm gonna see. If I can find it.
But that they just recently passed a law that covers abortion as a free medical thing.
Huh?
I'm almost sure.
Is it? You said it was New Zealand?
I think it was. They've recently passed a lot of really amazing laws in New Zealand. They actually are honoring a river as a living being.
Oh, I've heard that one. That is awesome.
Because the indigenous people recognize this river as a living being. Therefore, their government is now honoring this river as a living being.
That's awesome.
Hello. India, the Ganges River is a living being. She's a goddess.
I've heard that.
You know what I mean?
I learned that from Morgan Freeman.
Well, learn it someplace.
I don't know. I can't find it in this. This is when we expand and we get staff. We'll have someone in the back room doing and talking to in our ear. It is. It's free in New Zealand. So yeah, it's interesting. We've got different parts of the United States doing totally the opposite things. And so I would argue that if you're transgender, and I know this is hard for some of you, but it's possible. If you're transgender, get the hell out of your state if they're hostile toward you and go to a state where they're friendly toward. In fact, Shannon used to be on our show, one of our co-hosts. She moved from a hostile state, Montana, to Oregon. And actually, the guest that you saw in the last episode 2.
The next episode.
The next episode, sorry. The next episode, she moved from Montana too to come to Oregon.
She did.
She did, yeah.
Confusing my guess.
Yes, you are.
And again, like I have a friend who lives in Seattle who went to high school with Shannon in Montana, who is a transgendered woman. So yeah. So people do it. People move. People get themselves to a safe place. You know? And again, you might struggle at first, but the opportunities here are 1,000 times better than they are where you're coming from.
So much better if you're coming from some place that's ruled by conservatives.
I'm gonna say it backward.
Go ahead. Okay.
It's my opinion, and I'm being judgy. Yes, I am.
It's okay. So yeah, I would strongly encourage anyone out there who's watching this show and does not like where you live to move. Don't tolerate where you don't want to be. Now, if you've got roots there, you've got family there, I understand. But
you know what?
Your happiness.
There's always that connection though. You know what I mean? And in some cases, your family's disowned you anyway. So what are you holding on to?
Well, exactly.
But if you do have a connection with your family, those bonds don't snap and break just because you move further away.
Amen, sister.
My family is not here. I don't have anything.
Right.
The only family I have here is my grandmother. And she's got dementia in a home. So, but my connection to my family is stronger than ever, if anything.
Yeah. In fact, they came up and visited you.
Yes, they were. Yeah. They were all at my wedding and everything.
There you go. So there's no reason that you still can't keep in touch with your family, even while you move to a place that's more amenable to who and what you are.
People from other countries move out of country all the time from better opportunity.
Yes, for better opportunity. Yes,
for better opportunity.
For a better opportunity. And so check your stories. If you might be telling yourself a story that I can't leave. No, you can leave. You might be telling yourself, I can't afford it, or I'll never find a job, or if I move over there, who will I live with, and blah, blah, blah. There's all kind of disempowering stories you could be telling yourself that keeps you right where you are in the situation that's doing nothing but creating stories for yourself. You're making up stories.
Absolutely.
That reinforce the stories you already have, when the solution might be just leaving.
I'm on a Facebook group, local Portland, and it's a transgender housing group. And all the time there's somebody, hey, I'm coming from so-and-so. It's me and my cat. We're great people. I identify this way, that way. This is my budget. This is what I can afford a month.
Perfect.
And or there's queer house with 2 rooms available. We've got this and that, and this is the money, and this is who's living here. And all the time. So it's out there. You gotta search. You gotta change that story. You gotta search for Facebook groups and all these different wonderful connections that we have. As much as I'm not the biggest social media person personally, I do Facebook and that's it. The cat agrees with me. There's some really great connections that can be made. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through these different media, that mediums that we have. So it's all possible. But again, you gotta change your story, and you gotta believe that it's possible.
And this is what Remy is saying is really important to understand. If you have a story that says you can't leave where you are, you will not be able to find the resources that Remy is talking about. You have to change the stories so that your perception broadens, so that you can then see resources that are aligned with the stories you're telling. So if you say, I can't leave because I can't afford it, and then you try to find a place where you could leave to, you're not going to be able to find any resources to help you because you believe you can't leave. So you first have to adjust the stories before you start looking. And then once you do that, the universe will help you find the stories.
And help you find the resources.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You change your stories to a story of belief.
Yes.
Believing that it's possible, believing that it's gonna be better, believing that there's someone out there, there are people out there, there are friends that you haven't made yet that are gonna help you. And you just have to believe these stories, and then you start doing things like searching Facebook groups in that local area.
Yeah.
And then, and the universe will align.
That's right. Things will start happening to you.
People will come to you.
That's right.
A room is going to open up that you can afford.
Yes.
A job that you're going to be perfect for is going to be posted.
Yes.
And it'll all fall into place.
Yes.
And it will. But you've got to have the stories and the beliefs that align you with that reality.
You said it perfectly. So while in the United States, things seem to be going hell in a handbasket, while at the same time, things seem to be going great in some states, we've got, what should I do there? Let's take a break. It's
about that time
anyway. It's about that time anyway.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back after these messages. Not really messages. We'll just be right back.
The Transamorous Network.